This is Bishop Michael Burbidge, and you are listening to the Walk Humbly podcast.
Welcome to the Walk Humbly podcast. My name is Billy Atwell. I'm the Chief Communications Officer for the Diocese of Arlington and the co-host of this podcast. Since the launch of our first podcast, we have shared with you some of Bishop Burbidge's one-minute radio spots and his homily and Lenten message from Ash Wednesday. I now introduce to you our host, Bishop Burbidge. Bishop, how are you?
Thank you, Billy. Round two. Here we go.
Yeah, very good, very good. And I want to go ahead and give a shout out to those who have listened, and especially those who wrote reviews on iTunes. It was great to see those and your encouragement, and I am aware that it was a little soft in the volume. Hopefully you're listening to it with a little more vibrancy and and aren't having that same technical issue. We are, as Bishop Burbidge said in the end of the last podcast, we're figuring it out as we go, and we promise to keep improving each episode. So, Bishop, since that first podcast, have you heard feedback about this?
Yes, surprisingly. I was very pleased to hear the number of people who heard the podcast and expressed appreciation for it. And as I mentioned to them, and as you hear me say often, that's what our Holy Father, Pope Francis, and his predecessors have taught us, that we are to use every appropriate means possible, every tool possible to communicate the good news, to stay in contact with our faithful, and a podcast is a great way of doing so.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, last time we talked, it was before the Super Bowl. The Eagles won. Talk a little bit how you're feeling.
Billy, that game aged me 10 years, but it was well worth it. It was a great Super Bowl. A lot of points were scored, and it went down to the wire. So it was. But of course, as I mentioned before, Philadelphia being my hometown, where my family still resides, all my family members. Happy for all of them, and so it was a great game. I enjoyed it.
Now, obviously, there's a personal victory in that for you, and that you're an Eagles fan. But I remember I heard you were saying that there was some spiritual lessons to glean from it.
Well, that's one of the reasons I like sports. I think that they always provide good spiritual reflections and insights, and even some homily material once in a while. But I really do think from this sports, the Super Bowl game, there are some good analogies. I mean, one was that the Eagles had that underdog theme, and they were using the thing. Let's not worry about what everyone else is saying about us. We know who we are, and we know what we can accomplish. And I think that's so important, especially for our young people. I always try, when I'm speaking with our high school students, even our college students, I always try to say, don't let the world define you. Right? It's God who defines you. You're created in God's image and likeness. The Holy Spirit of God lives and dwells in you. You're precious in the sight of God. You have potential, and don't be defined by others or by the world. Be that person God's calling you to be, and use those gifts and talents to the best of your abilities. And so I think that was definitely one of the lessons. Another lesson I thought was fantastic was the next day, the MVP of the Super Bowl, Nick Foles for the Eagles, he really gave, and I hope maybe some of our listeners have heard it directly, he really gave this great talk about embracing failures. In other words, what he was saying, he didn't just wake up one morning and was a Super Bowl MVP. Prior to that, he had some disappointments in life, disappointments professionally. He even talked about wanting to walk away from the game because of some of the things he felt that he failed at. And he said it was only when he was willing to embrace failure, that I'm not perfect, and life will have its ups and downs. And when we fail, we don't stay down. We use that to our advantage. What are the lessons to learn? And I really thought that's a great lesson for all of us. We can't let our failures keep us down. That's the last thing God wants. He showed us how to, when you fall, to pick yourself up. And nothing's going to happen to us, or our failures or our sufferings or setbacks that will not lead to glory if we approach it that way. So I thought that was a great lesson too.
On that same point, there was a bunch of funny kind of mashup videos after the Super Bowl of Bill Belichick leading up to it, where he would be giving interviews, and he's notorious for giving bad interviews because he doesn't say much. He just kind of wants to do it because he has to. I'm sure it's in his contract. But he would regularly say, they would ask him about previous games. Well, what about when this happened, or how are you going to prepare after that failure? And often he would say, we're focused on the next game. We're looking ahead to the next thing. And I almost feel like there could be a spiritual lesson in that there will be people, or maybe even it's yourself, that keep reminding you of where you stumbled, rather than looking forward and say, I can do better. We can perform better in our spiritual lives, whatever it may be. I kind of saw that same theme in that funny video. It wasn't intended to be serious, but I kind of saw something in that along those same lines.
Yeah, exactly. Another thing I thought was really great right after the Super Bowl, and done very appropriately, I think, it was the quarterback, couple star players, the coach, in a very appropriate way. Just first of all, just thanking God. And I say, even in that moment, just to be aware that everything we accomplish in life is only through the goodness of the Lord. Certainly with our cooperation and our hard work and dedication, sure, but it's only with God's grace. So to be able to recognize that in our daily lives too, right? Because we have successes every day too, along with the failures, but to the glory of God, only through Him.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I heard something that I didn't know about you. You're a movie buff.
Well, I wouldn't say a movie buff. I sometimes you hear me talking about sports, but I do. I love going to the movies. I love musicals. Around our high schools, I'll try to go to their games, but I try to go to their musicals and their concerts. I do like that. They're the kind of things that help me to relax. Yeah.
I don't want to put you on the spot. Have you seen any lately that you've enjoyed?
Oh yeah. So The Darkest Hour is about Churchill and his rise to leadership during the early days of World War II. Incredible acting, but a great film on leadership. And I think, not only for history buffs, but I think people learning, what do you do in the midst of challenges and crisis. I think there's a lot to be learned by that. I also saw The Post, which was about the Post and its competition with the New York Times, and at a time where there was secrecy, whether Pentagon papers should be revealed. But I thought that was a fascinating movie. And I also saw a musical recently. I think it's called The Greatest Showman. It's about P.T. Barnum.
Yeah.
And it's a musical. It's really well done. And what I thought was a really great lesson in that movie. There were two, I thought. One was, when his early struggles of trying to meet success, and all along the way, just knowing the importance of his family and friends and faith. But then he reached a certain point in time where that success, he forgot the basics, and guess what happened? His life started crumbling. It happens to any of us who do that, right? But then he was reminded and went back to what was truly important, and his life got back in order. So I thought that was a great lesson. And it was also, at one point, the people who made up, the show or the circus were unique for different characteristics and things like that. But he treated them as special, as important, as unique. But there was one point in the movie he forgot that too. And you saw that hurt. And it kind of leads to a song that I think is up for one of the best awards called This Is Me. That's probably bad grammar, right? This Is Me. But it's saying kind of what I was saying earlier. But you know what? It doesn't matter what we look like. It doesn't matter what our, what's wrong with our external features or whatever. I'm special, and he remembered that. And so I thought there was a lot to learn there. So
that's very good. So folks looking to for a date night. Or
Yeah, I didn't know I was going to do a movie review on my podcast here. This is pretty good.
This is a variety show. So we're within Lent now, and one of a trend I've noticed lately is a lot of diets. With the way the internet works, so many diets are able to be shared, and you can learn about them very quickly. And there's something called intermittent fasting that is mentioned pretty frequently, and it's basically short periods of fasting for part of a day or a day a week where you always fast. And it's explained typically within the context of physical benefits of this intermittent fasting. Obviously, as Catholics, we would take it a step further. Yeah, there may be physical benefits, but we really do it for spiritual benefits. Talk to folks a little bit about what fasting does for the soul. What does it do for the individual?
Yeah, and fasting is one of those time-tested disciplines, spiritual disciplines that you hear are not only the Lord, but the holy men and women, the saints, always speak about the need of fasting. And as we do in the sacred season of Lent, we're reminded of that call. And fasting helps us to remember that nothing of this world will ever be able to satisfy our spiritual hunger or quench our spiritual thirst. It will always fall short, whether it's money, whether it's power, whether it's titles or possessions or whatever. The things of this world will not be able to fulfill us. And so, but sometimes we get into this pattern of living where we begin to think we can't do without it. And fasting is that ability to say, I'm giving up, certain things in life that I cling to. And all of a sudden, I realize, well, first of all, I can do without this. And then we begin to see, and secondly, I'm experiencing a freedom that I really did not enjoy prior to that. And fasting is supposed to remind us of our reliance and dependency on God as the one who sustains us. So certainly for health reasons or whatever, as you mentioned, it's good. It's all we should, we should stay strong in body and spirit. But fasting for a spiritual reason, remember, there's only one who can satisfy our hunger.
It seems like there's almost no downside to simplifying your life a little bit. And food is one of the most basic things. And to think that, wow, I could even do without that for a day,
right,
seems to really almost like correct the compass.
Yes.
Like the compass gets off course. I'm going to give you an analogy that you weren't expecting, but I think it might work. You tell me if it does. Our kids were getting to where they were fighting over toys constantly. They would see another as a toy, they would want it, they would take it, and they would clamor over it. We took away a lot of the toys. And we said, now you only have books for a day. We did that. Books, and you play with each other. And their behavior was so much better after that. And I feel like we simplified their life. They had too many options, too many things, and then they wanted, and greed and all these things come into play. But I feel like fasting is almost like that. You take away things that are distracting. What am I going to eat? When? How? Right. Who am I going to eat with? All these things. Take that away for a moment and just think about the simple. I almost feel like you can teach this lesson outside of fasting to a little kid,
right? No,
in the right context.
That's very good image. Yeah, it's very good analogy.
So this year, Ash Wednesday and Valentine's Day fell on the same day, which made for a lot of great, social media memes and jokes and things like that. But do the two have anything in common in your mind?
Yes, right. Love.
Oh.
They both have love in common. Ash Wednesday. We begin the sacred season of being reminded of Christ's love for us, his passion. He takes up his cross, dies for us, so sacrificial. A love that doesn't count the cost. And that's the season we enter into. And Valentine's, of course, we associate with, those men and women who share a special bond and love. But that love is always an imitation of Christ's love. So it also has to be sacrificial and selfless, and a love that does not count the cost. So in some ways, Yeah, you're right. I saw some of the stories, and you can have fun with that a little bit. But seriously, both days are about love, and it's kind of neat that they come together this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll coming back to Lent in a moment, but on the theme of love and Valentine's Day, recently you had a message for National Marriage Week, which is since concluded, but you had a message for couples. For those who didn't get to see that message, what was the primary thing you wanted to communicate during that week?
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank our husbands and wives, our married couples, for their witness, their example. It's such a great gift to the church, the beautiful vocation of married love. And to encourage our married couples. Our Holy Father reminds us that as bishops, as priests, we should be encouraging those who are living this beautiful vocation given to them, God, because they need encouragement. Because we are living in a society now where it's not always revered and upheld as the beautiful vocation that it is. So this witness, it should be affirmed, and so certainly want to do that, and to encourage our married couples. It's just like the vocation of priesthood. It's a daily renewal of a yes. Of the yes that you gave when vows were exchanged, or for a priest as you prostrated and were ordained. It's not a one-time yes. It's one repeated and lived every single day, and to say that to each other, and I always want to. I look at my own family members, my own nieces and my niece and nephew who are married, and there's so many responsibilities in their own lives, their professions, and their parents, and so with the children. But I sometimes worry, that they also need time for themselves, of really some quality time with each other, and so. When Valentine's Day is not Ash Wednesday, our couples find that time to celebrate and maybe to be alone. But, I often hear married couples talk about, we need a regularly scheduled date night. And I would encourage that, but you have to make it a priority, I'm sure. But you really need, I would encourage for that one-on-one time together, hopefully every day in some way, but those special moments to celebrate. It's just, I would just think it would be so essential.
A priest once said, and I thought it was very well taken, was the things that you care about, you schedule. You make it time. Well, I got to make sure I do this, so that you schedule it. And I think it's easy sometimes to say, well, let's do a date night this week. Okay, we'll figure that out later.
No.
Sometimes you won't. It's kind of
right.
important. So let's sit down and schedule that, because he was referring to it in terms of prayer life.
Right.
That it's not easy to remember when you wake up and your calendar's in front of you and you know what you got to do for the day, to think, let's get right into it rather than let's begin with prayer. He says schedule prayer. Make sure if it's not on your calendar, it's easy to miss. So that would be at least my encouragement for married couples, would be really schedule it and try to be diligent about doing it. And try to, variety. Sometimes you go out to eat, sometimes you go to a park, sometimes you go to a movie. You try different things, and it'll keep you engaged, and it won't feel like a routine or repetition.
Yeah, and I share that with our priests, too, because it's very important in priesthood. It's very important to have stay connected with your family. It's very important to have lay friends. But priests share a fraternity that is very unique, and it's supposed to be one of encouragement and mutual support. And so it's very important for priests to spend time together with priests. But guess what? Just like you said, if you don't schedule that, you don't make it a priority, all you're filled with are good intentions, and it never happens. Mm-hmm. And I get worried, to be honest, when I see priests not spending quality time together with priests. But if you don't fix it in and keep it as almost as a discipline, it just won't happen. Same thing with friendships, right? Our own friendships. We have, we owe that to each other. we talk about almsgiving in Lent, and we are so blessed in this diocese of the goodness of our faithful and how they share their resources so much with those in need. But I also remind us that sometimes one of the hardest things to give is our time. It's our time to say, my spouse or my child or my student or my brother priest, I want to give them this quality time. And that sometimes is very sacrificial, because you can think of everything else around you that would demand your attention. And probably those things, months from now or wherever, you won't even remember what it was. But the quality time you give with someone, you'll never forget. And sometimes that person will never forget what you did for them. Mm-hmm. So, I always think about the gift of time.
Going back to the Lent, is there any other messages or anything as we kind of go past Ash Wednesday and into the heart of Lent? Is there anything that you would want people to really think about and consider for their spiritual lives?
Yeah, I think that, I think those time-tested disciplines, as I mentioned, are just so essential in our lives, especially now, of prayer and fasting and almsgiving. We talked about fasting. We talked about almsgiving. But prayer also. We all begin Lent, I'm sure today. We're taping this on Ash Wednesday, right? So we all begin today, no doubt, with these great intentions. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. And we really mean it. And I'm sure we all woke up this morning with a desire really to change. That's what we call in our faith conversion, right? A radical change on the way we live. And we all recognize that in our lives. There's things in our lives just we know are not of God. And so we want to change. And so we wake up with this fervor. So it's important, I think, to remember that Lent is 40 days. We talk about the 40 days of Lent, but it's also day by day. So don't just look at the big picture. How am I going to do from Ash Wednesday until Lent is over? And then I'll examine how I did. No. Take it day by day. All right? So I wake up tomorrow. It's the Thursday after Ash Wednesday. How did I do yesterday? Did I see that change? And then if I didn't, not to say, well, see, I can't do it this Lent. I'm going to give up. No. Let me try to do that better tomorrow. So I always say approach Lent also as a day-to-day journey. But most of all, remember your desire, your commitment. I'm going to do this will never be enough. It just isn't. Because you can only do it with God's grace and the strength that you find, most especially as you unite yourself to Him in prayer. And so those desires, those promises that we've made, the things that we're going to give up and all that, they have to be entrusted to the Lord every day and say, and by your grace, God, I will do this. So just that real renewal of our own prayer lives.
Coming up, depending on when people listening to us, it might have already passed, but Pope Paul VI High School, or Paul VI High School, is breaking ground on a new campus in Loudoun County. Talk a little bit about that, what your excitement is in that project and what you've seen so far.
Yeah, so I'm blessed, to be coming into a diocese that has already decided prior to my arrival to build a new high school. Paul VI will have a new location, and it's going to be a high school that will reflect an excellence in education, and the facilities will show that commitment. But what will be clearly reflected is its uniqueness as a Catholic school. And so, to build a new high school in this day and age is a great accomplishment for Paul VI community. It's a great accomplishment for the Diocese of Arlington. And I know it's been talked about for a while, but when you start putting shovels in the ground and have that ceremony, it's like, this is real. And I know a lot of people are behind this momentum, and I'm grateful for all who are supporting this endeavor. Also, our other high schools too are all finding the need, thank God, to expand and to improve its facilities, and are doing great work also.
You always say it's a good problem to have when you're trying to figure out how to accommodate the need.
That is right. Exactly. Exactly.
Before we wrap up, I just want to let everyone know, if you would please, if you're enjoying this podcast, please go write a review. Whether you're on iTunes or Google Play, Stitcher, whatever the platform is that you're listening to this podcast, go write a review. That really does a lot of things. Principally, for those who are thinking about listening to the podcast or subscribing, it lets them know what others think, what they valued in it, what they enjoyed, and tells them a little bit about what they maybe heard that really inspired them or encourage them in their faith. So that's one thing. The other is send some questions in. Bishop Burbidge will be happy to answer some questions from the faithful in a particular episode. So if you want to send your questions in, email communications@arlingtondiocese.org, and just try to make sure the questions would be of general interest to the faithful and the public and so on. If you have a particular pastoral question, that can be handled separately. But again, that's communications@arlingtondiocese.org. Bishop, if you would conclude with whatever your final thoughts are, as well as your blessing.
Well, Billy, thanks for what you just said, because I really do want to affirm that to our listeners. This podcast is just to be in contact, to have contact with the wonderful faithful in our diocese. So I would be thrilled to answer questions that might be helpful, or to talk about topics that may be of interest. So that feedback, we're doing it for our wonderful people out in our communities, and so please let us know. Now, I will only read the positive reviews, so you can hold it. You can hold the negative reviews. You don't have to show me them.
The one-star reviews I'll leave out.
Yeah,
don't worry.
You leave them out. So no, I just wish everyone a Lent filled with God's amazing graces and abundant blessings, and a time of renewal and growth, and know of God's great love for you above all else, and celebrate His mercy in the sacrament of penance, maybe even at the beginning of the season. I think that's always a good idea. Always remembering, dear friends, that there is no sin, there is no failure greater than God's mercy and love. And our priests are available in this diocese to celebrate this sacrament so frequently, including throughout the sacred season of Lent on Wednesday evenings. The light is on, we say, 6:38 in our churches. So I do encourage you that, but wishing you many blessings, and pray that throughout this sacred season and always we will walk humbly with our God. Thank you for listening to the Walk Humbly podcast. Make sure you check out more episodes on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. You can follow me on Twitter @Bishop Burbidge, where I offer spiritual reflections each morning in the gospel and share photos and updates of what is going on in the Diocese of Arlington. Stay up to date with news, event information, inspirational content, and more by subscribing to our e-newsletter at arlingtondiocese.org.